Hello YouTube, Jonas Weefield here once again for my last console review. Now this console was, yep, there's the controller. It was one of the greatest consoles ever made. One of the most successful consoles ever made, actually. It was the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, they had some of the most memorable games in history, and much like the PS2, it destroyed both of its competitors, the Atari 7800 and the Sega Master System. Now, the NES, as most people called it, was, well, like I said, one of the greatest game stations in history, and it had almost 1,000 games on it. Now, I'm not sure if that's a lot or not, but the Super Nintendo, I know, had a little bit more, like 10, maybe 15 more games, but the Nintendo was just a better console in general. 8-bit forever. And, the Nintendo had games on it like the 3 Super Mario Brothers games, the one Mario Brothers game. It had Donkey Kong on it. It had Pac-Man 2, or no, that was Super Nintendo. Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures, which was, by the way, not a game I'd recommend. The NES had Action 52, another game I would not recommend. I'm trying to think what else. Had a lot of pirated games on it. It had Godzilla Monster of Monsters on it, I know that. That was a good game, actually. It wasn't too bad. But Godzilla 2 was a bad game. Yep, those were some of the games that it had on it. Now, let's talk about the console itself. Nintendo released its first console way back in the 70s. It was a Pong console. It wasn't too much. Everybody released a Pong console. Even Atari did. But, Nintendo and Atari worked together for a long time. They worked on games for the 2600. They worked on the 5200, which was a fail. That's mainly why Nintendo broke off, because when they were working on the 7800 together, Nintendo didn't like it, and they broke off and said they were going to do their own system, which is what they did, and it became the Nintendo. And yeah, it destroyed Atari, destroyed the other competitor, the Sega Master System, which, if Nintendo never did break off, the Sega Master System is what would have taken that war. But yeah, the Nintendo went on for a few years. It got the record for most sold consoles ever. It then, let's see, it was then killed by the Sega Genesis, which started the greatest war in video game history, because when Nintendo came back with the Super Nintendo, it was on. But, anyways, the games were cartridge-based, much like the Super Nintendo after it, and the Atari 2600 before it. Yeah, the only thing left to talk about here is the controller. Like I said, it's right there. It has start and select, a D-pad, and A and B. It didn't have too much on it. It didn't have no L and R, no, whatever. It didn't even have a handle. It was just a rectangular controller. However, what came before it was the 5200 and the 2600, which had analogs, and they had digits on them, and in the case of, I believe it was the 5200, had buttons on the sides of it. Yeah, the Nintendo was the most advanced controller at the time. Of course, when the Genesis came out, it wasn't the most advanced anymore, And controllers have just been advancing ever since. Before you know it, they'll have a lot of buttons on them. Heck, maybe even there'll be a remote. And no, I don't mean the Wii remote. But anyways, yep, that's the Nintendo Entertainment System for you. And that was my last console review. Next time, I'm finally gonna get to it. I'm gonna be getting to the Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis video. Finally. And then after that, we'll begin the game reviews. So, until then, goodbye, YouTube.